Yes, sir. Welcome back to another episode of Trap or Dive Podcast. I am your host, Mual, and with the fellas, we got a different show today. There was some new news, some news that we haven't been familiar with in these parts. But AJ and Dre is checking in, obviously on the Commander's side. The breaking news is Washington traded for a kicker. Cade York, I believe, is his name, from Cleveland, and they also cut a receiver. It's like, no, let me stop. Let me not mess that up. Jahan Dotson, man, he got traded to the Eagles, dog. He got traded, and before we tap into it, like I said, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for everybody that's in here on the YouTube side. I would definitely appreciate everybody tapping in. Kenny, I'm with you forever. I don't know all the people who always. It's a couple people who say the intro too long. I don't give a damn. This Montez is fire, bro. And Jay Jules, the producer. Anyway, audio side, make sure you follow, subscribe, rate, review. Free to do so in terms of showing your support. We definitely appreciate it. Fellas, what's going on, bro? How y'all doing, dog?
Hey, emergency pod time. Shit, I'm great, man. I'm ready for the weekend. We got some news. Shit, hey, what more can we ask for? Are you sipping today?
Come on, man. I gotta bring. So it's Blanco
like
Mall today. It's no yet.
Pineapple juice.
Yeah. Ever since AJ introduced me to that, bro, it ain't been the same since, bro. I've been on the tequila and pineapple for a long time, bro. 2 months, 3 months now. May is when I got introduced to that combo. Yeah, it's a long time, bro.
You can't lose. You can't lose with that.
Nah, dog. But you know who did lose today? Jahan Dotson, bro. Or more so Ron Rivera. But we're not here to talk about Ron because I think Ron really lost in terms of all of that stuff. We can talk about that at another time. More likely Tuesday. But Jahan in this new regime just didn't make the cut. Obviously, he was traded to Philly for Washington acquired a 3rd rounder, 2 7th rounders, and they sent Jahan and a 5th rounder to the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's just go ahead and talk about it. Everybody in the chat, if you got comments, y'all go for it. I surely got thoughts, but I'm gonna give the fellas the floor first.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, Mo. I actually remember saying this on the last podcast. Like on Tuesday, I said that Jahan's comments last week bothered me because he kind of admitted that he's down and he's not really himself. And I said, I don't see him getting cut, but I can see him being traded. Now, I didn't see it happening before the last preseason game. But to me, that the Eagles trade, where they traded him to, that's an indication of how they felt about Jahan. I think Jahan as a player, they just didn't value very highly, because when you make this type of trade in a division, that says we're not scared of this dude coming back to bite us in the ass, you know. But the thing to me that's been kind of bothering me with the discussion today, and this is coming from a Jahan fan. I like Jahan coming out of Penn State, but I feel like a lot of the discussion is acting like he's really done something in the league to this point to kind of warrant the reaction that's coming out. You know, like even Wale. I mean, shout out Wale, but Wale was going off on Twitter today. He was like, I cannot believe we just traded Dotson to the ops. Oh, why we do this? And then you see, you know, everyone chiming in, even Eagles fans, they're so happy. But I guarantee you couldn't find one Eagles fan before this trade happened today that thought Jahan Dotson was a success in the NFL. But now, you know, Howie Roseman makes the trade. Howie Roseman looks great. And you have people kind of questioning, why did Washington do this? You know, what is Washington doing? But I feel like that's just a reputation thing. You know, Howie Roseman, his reputation is here. Washington's trying to build their reputation. So I feel like whatever side of the coin Washington was on this trade, the reaction was going to be, what the hell is Washington doing? You know, but as a Washington fan who's watched Jahan Dotson and who has kind of hoped that Jahan Dotson was going to blossom into something, hearing the reports this offseason, this shouldn't have been a shock to anyone, really. I mean, I think the only shock is that he got traded to the Eagles in the division. But it shouldn't be a shock to anyone who's been paying attention, because Jahan seemingly hasn't impressed this coaching staff at all. I mean, they've been looking for ways to kind of, you know, push him down the depth chart, so to speak. Like Dan Quinn flat out said last week or earlier this week, we don't have a number 2 wide receiver right now. You know, that was every indication of how they felt about Jahan Dotson at this point. So to me, the trade itself wasn't a surprise. I mean, I guess, like I said, the only surprise was him going to the division. But at the same time, I feel like at the end of the day, this is a good move for Washington. You get a third round pick, you know, and a couple of seventh round picks. Maybe they're using that as ammo, the trade if they have to again. But then again, it's going to be a loaded wide receiver class next year. So this to me is a long term move, and I don't think that Washington necessarily lost this trade. Well, at least not today. I don't think
I don't think it was no losers. I ain't gonna lie to you.
the
I don't
Eagles.
think nobody lost.
You're right, Maul, because the Eagles may have got a guy. I mean, maybe Jahan Dotson finds his foot in there. Maybe he, with the pressure off of him, he's playing with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith up there now. Maybe, like I said, maybe he turns into the NFL player he wants to be, or everyone kind of expects him to be. But I don't think this indicates that Washington loses, even if he becomes that, because Washington could come out winners as well in this trade.
Yeah, I mean, definitely caught off guard that it happened on a Thursday, before the last final preseason game. But I believe that something was going to happen the week of cuts. I pretty much touched on this on my Twitter account like almost about a week ago, that they should start fielding calls for him because he still has value. And the value really comes into play because of the fact that he was drafted a first round wide receiver, 16th to be exact overall, which allows teams to still have an option to be able to utilize, even if he does end up like succeeding or not necessarily meeting your expectations, it's still at a low amount. You have the Eagles in a team where they've been searching for a true number three, number four for a couple years now. They brought in Paris Campbell this season to be that number three. They've also allowed guys from the past, like a John Ross, who was a first round pick back in the day, speedster, out of Washington, to come in. Last year, they had to bring in Julio Jones, and even we got a guy that they thought was going to be their long term number three guy, Olamide Zacchaeus. I think that both sides, both.
He butchered that.
Bro, when I tell you, like, we don't get names right for shit on this show, bro. Like, it's we've
But we can
That's
never
not his
call him
been
name,
OZ.
Olamide
No,
Zacchaeus.
Zacchaeus.
but we can call him
Zacchaeus,
OZ.
whatever the
OZ
fuck
is
his
short.
name is. Like,
We call Tyler Biotic badass, bro, because we gave up on
man,
his last name.
what makes it worse is I'm African and I've never even heard of that last name before. I don't know where Buddy is from.
I don't even know how to say his
Exactly.
first name. His last name just got easier. Zacchaeus is easy,
Uh,
but the
yeah,
first name I can't
Alameda
get it.
Alameda is a pretty common West African name, but like the last name
Alameda.
I've never heard of before. Either way, you know, I think it's very telling in Jahan Dotson as far as the player and how much Washington didn't view him as a threat to trade him in the division. You got Dan Quinn, that's now the head coach, who had to go against him four times over the last 2 years of him being in the NFC East with Washington, and not really feeling like this is a guy that I necessarily have to game plan going against defensively. So for him to know the entire, pretty much the install of the offense and how they plan to utilize Jaden Daniels and the entire offense, him knowing all of that information and still saying, "Hey, Philadelphia, you can have him." That is extremely telling of the player and who they think he is and what he will eventually end up becoming. I feel like them getting a third round pick is a great incentive, even though they had to give up a fifth. Philly's probably banking on the fact that they'll probably get some compensatory picks in the third round, so it's not really too much of a risk on their end. Now Washington has some assets to go try to possibly go and acquire a guy. I know we tired of hearing the Ayuk name, but there's no way in hell you could go into this season with what you got right now as your wide receiver corps. So wide
Well,
receiver core.
okay. Yeah, I know if you was done. That's why I paused for a second, AJ. So here's my thing, right? Now, when it started, and I texted y'all that I agreed with everything that y'all were saying in the chat, and I still kind of do that. Like, it's plausible. And I also speculated on Twitter about the idea of a trade. Um, but I had to kind of retrace my steps for a second because, like, when I started today, Dan Quinn was on Kevin Sheehan's podcast, and something that caught my attention. And I said, I don't know if he intentionally insinuated something, or if, and this is before the Dotson trade, and I don't know if he intentionally insinuated something, or if he was just kind of acknowledging the competition in terms of, like, because Kevin Sheehan asked him, are there still really some true roster spots that are people position like battling out for, or do you have everything answered right now? And one thing he said about the receiver position specifically was we're trying to find that fifth receiver position. And the reason why that stood out to me is because he named other positions, right? And he said, I'm trying to find that fourth, fifth corner, trying to find that like not multiple numbers, but he only said we're trying to find that fifth receiver. That's the first thing that caught my eye. And I was like, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I noted it. And then I thought about this too in retrospect. Like, I didn't expect, to Dre's point, Jahan to get traded this soon. Like I said, I was telling somebody if something happened, it would be something down the line before the trade deadline. But I don't think that he gets traded anytime soon. And I just didn't see it. And I was clearly dead wrong. But if we think about so many different factors, right? You have Zacchaeus, Terry, Diami that are undoubtedly showing more in training camp and in various ways during the preseason games, right? Even with Jahan Dotson playing all the snaps that he's played the last two games. If he's fallen out of favor with the coaching staff in terms of like the solidified number 2 wide receiver position, I don't understand why I would have thought that it would have been okay for Jahan to not only take a back seat to multiple wide receivers, but be on this roster and let's just say you get 100 targets a year before, like 100 targets your first 2 years. Now all of a sudden you go from 100 a year to like 40. And you're like wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. So like, I don't think that ever made sense for me to even think that he would still be on the roster moving forward. And that kind of should have connected the dots for me. But I think that for you to one, not only like you didn't play special teams while you was here during your time in Washington. There was rumors, I don't know how solid it was, that it was Jahan Dotson, but there was rumors about a player who had no like no excitement or no positive approach to even being put on special teams in practice, and they assumed that it was Jahan Dotson.
Real quick, Maul, didn't I say on Tuesday Buddy was jumping in the air to field punts?
Yeah, you was talking about special teams on Tuesday. Yeah. And all of that to say, like, if you don't hold no value as like the 4th or 5th receiver connecting all these dots, how do you even make the team? I like this all of that is kind of like I think that the coaching staff thought about that, not exactly how I laid it out, but more intricately about like those different factors, but also like the players that are even playing at this point at that receiver position are way more physical than John. I didn't want to mention this like during the actual film session, but like just my thoughts when I watched him run routes, and I'm not doing this in hindsight. I like if y'all trust me and y'all know me, then take me for my word. But when I watched him run routes, I said, bruh, like I know I'm not tripping. Like I was like, I'm gonna let, because again, I didn't think he was gonna get traded. I was like, I'm gonna let this slide, but he don't even look like he interested in running and playing out there. Like he running his routes a little lazy, bruh. He bending the routes a little bit. They aren't sharp because it doesn't show like too much what's the word, like intensity or like urgency. He doesn't urgency, like all of that stuff. And I'm like, that is everything that stood out to me, and it should have all clicked that he wasn't going to be here any much longer. It's unfortunate, man, because I was a fan and am a fan of Jahan Dotson. But at the same time, I'm very aware, like if it don't work out, like I'm not tied to players, even though I like them. But
look, Mark and AJ, can I ask both of you all this? I mean, I got a feeling what AJ is going to say, but I want to ask you all this because this is something I've been thinking about since the trade went down. Do we think that this trade happened more so because they have another move up their sleeve, such as an IU, possibly T. Higgins, and maybe even somebody that we're not even thinking of that's on a little bit of a lesser scale but can help this room? Or do we think that this move was made more so because of the emergence of Diami Brown and Luke McCaffrey just leapfrogging Jahan Dotson? Like, I want to get y'all thoughts on that.
I mean, I think Dre, Adam Peters coming in, and Dan Quinn also alongside with Cliff Kingsbury, they've understood that they've needed a wide receiver from the jump. I mean, when we had Adam Schefter on before things were really even catching wave with IU, I asked him the question, "Have you heard anything about Washington being connected to Brandon Ayuk?" And he was like, "Not at the moment." And maybe a couple weeks after the draft happened, that's when we started hearing about Washington, having conversations with Ayuk. Even more things started coming out from Ayuk's end as far as connecting himself with Jaden Daniels and wanting to be a commander. I think they've always known that they've needed another wide receiver. Just from looking at the tape and maybe even the draft profile that Adam Peters uh, carried from San Francisco here to Washington on Jahan Dotson, the player. I think that they've always wanted another guy. It's just that, they couldn't get the trade done how they wanted to at that moment with San Francisco. Now, as you get closer to the season, you kind of get some urgency. That's why you're starting to see other teams making moves with rookie players that they drafted. They're getting traded. Washington, they made their move today. They made two moves in one day for a kicker and also moving Jahan Dotson, who was, you know, scheduled to be the number two wide receiver for the team, and a lot of people identify as a weapon to go alongside, Terry McLaurin, Austin Eckler, Zach Ertz, and Jaden Daniels. I think that they realize that they need more to this room, and maybe they pull it off. Maybe something has already been done on the back end, and they're just trying to fine tune the rest of the details. But I don't believe that they go into week one with the current wide receiver room that they have.
I think I ain't gonna lie. That's kind of part of what I was gonna say too. But I'm glad. I'm glad you asked the question, Trey. I think they are content with their position group. Um, Whether or not they think it's good, that's not kind of the response that I'm giving. I just think they're content. Think about the moves that they made to this point. They brought in a couple veterans, Martavis Bryant, um, Byron Pringle, and I guess in the offseason they brought in Zacchaeus, right? But they've been trying to like backfill that position group for a while and or constantly throughout the offseason. And I think if they didn't like Jahan, again, back to my theory and how I laid everything out, but if they didn't like Jahan and didn't consider him one of their top three receivers, but they were comfortable all the way up until August 2022 in terms of who they had ahead of him, I still don't think that trade was necessarily or that trade would necessarily be for acquiring another receiver. Again, I did speculate and I do think it's plausible, but if I had to give an answer right now, I don't think that I don't think that trade for Jahan, what a trade sending Jahan to Philly was anything indicative of what's to come next. I more so just think that they were acquiring capital and keeping it pushing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I asked the question, because I was actually talking to some folks on Twitter, and some people, thought that this could be a precursor of another move to come, but other people were telling me that they thought that this could mean they just like Diami and Luke to fill those wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 spots. Now, I'm not sold that that's the case, because I mean they still have time. I mean, we got Tuesday to cut day. I even think the move to get the kicker was a little bit strategic, because some people was like, well, they could have waited till, the cut day with the waiver wire. They have the number 2 order in the waiver wire. But I'm like, do you want to use a number 2 order in the waiver wire for a kicker versus just trading and getting them now and waiting to see what kind of skill positions may be available at that point on Tuesday? Now, I don't know if that they're kind of necessarily eyeing the wide receiver position group for that, but they could be eyeing offensive tackle or whatever the case may be. But I mean, I'm kind of stuck in that. That's why I asked you all. I wanted to see you all's thoughts, because I do see a scenario where they do like Diami Brown enough to say, yeah, we're comfortable going into the season with him as a number 2. But then there's the other side of the token. When you think about it, Terry McLaurin is the only proven guy in that receiver group right now. I mean, as a guy that we know can go out there and do it on a consistent basis. We don't know that from Diami Brown yet. I mean, yes, we've seen Diami step it up this offseason. He's been looking good, and he's earned his stripes. He's kind of earned his opportunity in a sense. And same thing with kind of Luke McCaffrey in a sense. I mean, Luke McCaffrey is their drafted guy. We don't know what he can do yet on the field, on a consistent basis in the NFL. Right now, Terry is the only guy that we know what he can do. So that's what leads me thinking that is another move. Now, I don't know if it's that big splash move that the Washington fans are waiting for, but I just feel like there's another move at the wide receiver group coming. And who knows when that could be? It could be any time between now and Tuesday. I do feel like we'll know something between now and Tuesday because you do have a game in 2 weeks.
Yeah, man. I just pray that everything's good with Jahan. You feel me? Overall, off the field, you just never know what could be going on with someone off the field. Um, I know we've talked about it privately. You try to get him on here. I try to get him on here so many damn times, just to chop it up with him and just learn more about him as an individual. Because I have been seeing like the effort not the same as the guy that I watched, in the Big Ten at Penn State, and even his rookie year. The effort just wasn't there, but you never know. I think he's now in a better situation with Philadelphia, where he's not counting on the being the number two or the number three guy in the offense. He now gets to go around some veterans like a Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, and now be kind of like the fifth, sixth option because they got Dallas Goddard, Saquon. They got other guys over there that they can utilize, and he don't have to necessarily feel forced to be that guy. But I also get irritated from a fan perspective of this team, because what that was 2021, right? Or
22.
2022.
Yeah, 22.
2022, we had the opportunity to be live, Trapper Dive, alongside some other podcasts at FedEx Field covering the draft, where we interviewed a bunch of guys and everything. And I really thought that night was going to be special for this team at the wide receiver position, and either being able to get a Garrett Wilson, a Chris Olave, my favorite in particular,
Watch
Jameson
your shit. Thought we was
Williams.
getting Drake London.
Yeah, Jameson Williams. Yeah, you and Fred Smoot argued forever about Drake London. Also when they were sitting there at 11, Jameson Williams was available.
Hmm.
So was Kyle Hamilton. Those things didn't happen, and then when they traded back, the whole crowd was like, "What?" And then when they
Hmm.
traded back and selected Jahan Dotson, it was like everyone was kind of confused, including myself.
Jahan was
And
confused. Remember his
yeah,
reaction?
yeah, and that's what I was gonna get to. Like when he did his presser with the media, he said he wasn't even watching the draft. He said he was watching the NBA Finals. So he knew he wasn't even a first half, first round guy. Like he was expecting to be taken day two. Like from everything that he was hearing from his agent side, all of that, he wasn't even prepared to go 16th overall. So that's where it just sucks, because like there was really some talent on the board when they had that opportunity to draft. Even though Jameson Williams has had his little issues here and there, the speed that he brings to the table you can't teach. We now see Kyle Hamilton up the street. He's an all pro already in year two.
Hmm.
So that's where it just gets very frustrating from that element that you already have to move on from a 16th overall pick 2 years in.
Yeah. It's a lot to digest there. Like even the trade itself and who was in it. I mean, Dotson gone. Cole Turner got 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out. Um, and you got B Rob, and then you got another guy who's gone already. Who is that?
Well,
I'm thinking of
but
who's
you also got
oh
Big
Sam
Flip
Howell.
and
Sam
Sam
Howell.
Howell.
Sam
Sam
Howell's
Howell.
done.
Yeah.
That was the Fedarian Mathis draft too, right?
Yeah, it was
Yes,
the
sir.
Fedarian
Yeah,
Mathis
yeah,
jersey. And that's
yeah,
another thing I
yeah.
want to kind of tap into before trade deadline. I got a couple more minutes because all the fellas ain't here yet. Um, Two things. So let's close the book on receiver with this one question, and then I want to get into some other former Rivera picks. First part is the receivers. Who benefits the most with Jahan Dotson being out? Because them boys gonna have to step up. Like they made it clear as cut. Like, hey, that 2 spot is open. That 4 spot is open. I think that 3 spot belongs to Zacchaeus, but who benefits the most from Jahan Dotson?
I mean, it's definitely De'Ami Brown. You talking about a guy that had only 12 receptions for the entire season last year, and he was healthy. Um, I think in this preseason alone, he's probably had over half of those catches in 2 games. So with a guy like Diami, he stands to benefit from this the most. He now gets an opportunity to be in heavy rotation. He's also going into a contract year, as he was a third round pick, I believe, a couple years ago. So he has a opportunity to showcase himself for this team, possibly get a new contract or for another team. So I think that's the only person that truly benefits from it. The person you probably feel the worst for is Terry McLaurin, because that's who the defense is going to be keying on when it comes to the passing game.
Yeah, I mean, assuming there's no trade happening, then yeah, Diami Brown will be the guy that benefits the most. And I say that because Diami Brown will be the unquestioned number 2 wide receiver at this point. He's the only guy we've pretty much seen getting that work on the outside. Now, I mean, if there's a trade to happen, I do think that this benefits a little bit of Luke McCaffrey, because I thought that with the wide receiver group as it stood with Jahan Dotson, that he probably was going to get pushed to the inside. And, Diami, I had Diami going to the outside, and even though there was going to be competition, but I thought Jahan would slide into the inside. But now with Jahan gone, I do see a clear kind of opening for Luke to kind of step into that role with OZ. I mean, I do think there's going to be kind of a rotation at that spot, depending on what they're calling, what they want out of their personnel for that particular series. So, you got to see that Luke's going to probably get a little bit more time. I mean, you can even throw OZ in there. The OZ is going to benefit a lot from that as well. I mean, it's just more opportunities all around for those guys behind Terry. Again, assuming that there's no trade.
Hey, Jay Tyler, like, yeah, they've been keying on Terry, but ultimately that's not what you want as a player. Like, you want some of that pressure to be taken off of you. Like, when they keying in on you, especially if you get an offensive coordinator who's known for not moving wide receivers around, yeah, like you definitely don't want to be the main target. You
But
you
do we?
hope
But
that you can get
do
some help.
we? Let me just ask this real quick. Do we really think the Cliff's not going to move his wide receivers around? Now, I only say this because I know this was a thing in Arizona. I mean, it was a legit thing where they came up that he didn't move his wide receivers around a lot. But Terry says in practice he moves around a lot. So, are we really kind of concerned that this is going to be a thing going into the season?
I mean, I think we
Um,
got to question it until we see it. But what we've seen so far in preseason, he ain't been moving.
I think honestly what AJ said, I think it's fair to question. I think it's not a concern also at the same time right now, because there's so many different influences that we aren't considering, such as like the personnel packages, like coming out in, I think they came out in empty one of these games. I can't remember. They came out in empty formation, and they came out in 12 personnel, like two tight ends on the field. A running back was out there with two wide receivers. And like how you spread the field is important. How you utilize your run concepts is important. Um, so I say that to say I agree with AJ for the most part. But I also don't think it's a concern right now. I'm just in a wait and see mode and see how it affects the offense. All right, last thing, before we get the gang in here, the all 32 gang. Um, any other potential trades coming out like on the commander side? I remember what AJ said one time, and I want to bring this up. You had mentioned that Big Phil don't fit what they do defensively anymore. And I figured they don't have that body type on the interior side, like Big Phil or John Ridgeway. But at the same time, those are two of the same people. So like, could both of them be gone? Or either one of them be gone? Could I mean, I don't see Cole Turner getting traded because when he ran that corner route, bro, I don't think I'm ever get over that shit that I showed y'all, bro. That was
Hey,
so terrible.
that's your
He
That
boy.
disowned code that
that
day.
was that was so
That's
terrible,
your
bro.
boy. That's your
Um,
man.
but the two interior tackles, um, I don't know about Jamin because he's on the last year of his deal. But Phil got 2 more years, including this year, so two total years left on this contract. I guess I'll do there. Is there any potential trade partners or trade players left on the roster?
For me, I do think there's a potential, and I say that because they added 2 7th round picks today. And I keep thinking that something is coming, even if it's not for a wide receiver. To your point, Maul. I mean, there's other position groups in need, and it's kind of what I talked about with the K York acquiring today, with them acquiring the kicker. You set that move up to kind of, we got this out of the way right now. So now, I mean, they gave up a conditional seventh rounder, but again, they got 2 7th round picks back today. So I feel like that can be used in potential trades, even if it's for like maybe somebody along the offensive line. I mean, we've seen the injuries on the offensive line through this offseason so far. I mean, especially at the tackle spot. Like we haven't seen Brandon Coleman yet. Cornelius Lucas has been out for personal reasons. So, there could be a potential trade destination there looking at that market. As far as players, Federian Mathis and John Ridgeway, I think it's either or. I don't think both of them go, but I do see an either or situation. And that could be not even just a trade solution. It could be a release situation as well. Like one of those guys could get cut, but I feel like one of those guys may not make the team. So either one of those guys, I do hope you can get a trade out of it, even if it's a conditional 6th or 7th round pick, whatever their value may be, get some assets for those guys. But I think that's where you're looking at. Also, I think one of the kind of low key trade guys on this team, we could be looking at someone from that safety group getting traded. With Tyler Owens' emergence coming along, you could be looking at maybe a Dirk Forrest type of trade or somebody like that along those lines, like that can warrant some kind of trade or response. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see something else kind of happen as far as trades go with the Commanders going until Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to Washington's actual roster, a guy that could be traded just due to roster movement overall, and maybe teams having a need. Cornerback Michael Davis. I think that's a guy that has familiarity playing outside and inside, a lot of game reps. I think if a team needs a corner, that's a guy that they might be willing to move like a late round pick for. But outside of that, I really can't see anyone else being of value at this moment trade wise. Um, I think they will be active in the waiver wire and picking up some of these guys, especially at linebacker, offensive line, maybe some more safeties, as they love these safeties. Maybe some guys from Dallas get released because they're running a different scheme than what Dan Quinn was under Mike Zimmer. So maybe a guy like Marquise Bell gets released, and now you can bring him back into the fold and use him as like your hybrid linebacker. So I think I would pay more so close attention to who Dallas releases, especially from the defensive side of the ball. But yeah, that's all I really can see at this point. I definitely think that they'll be active with linebacker, tight end, offensive line, whatever the case is.
Man, back here laughing, said that shit ain't happening, huh?
Because I heard Marquise Bell come
Oh,
up.
you said Dallas. I mean, what I don't believe he's starting because what Eric Kendricks is there.
Well, we moved
Uh,
him to safety,
you
so
moved him
he
back to
behind.
safety.
Yeah, so he behind Donovan Wilson right now. But I mean,
Okay.
I mean, he could. It's a possibility. I ain't gonna knock your hopes.
But one thing I've been seeing about
I,
from
I mean, I ain't
Dallas
got no
fans.
hopes for the boy being there on the team. I'm just saying that I would keep my eye out on that. Just pay close attention to who they release defensively, as they already know the system, especially if they were in it for the past couple seasons. But I don't think Ball is like, or Bell, I should say, is that great of a player. I think he could fit the hybrid mode that they trying to go with, obviously, because they keep bringing in all these damn safeties. So I know he need to be on the back end is to be able to put in that box.
Well, look, I was just gonna say, as far as the Dallas goes, I've been having conversations, discussion with my Dallas fans friends, and they love telling me that Dan Quinn was horrible because he played safeties and linebacker position, which is why I would be surprised to see Dallas fans kind of hype up Marquise Bell because they didn't like him playing linebacker. That's for sure.
I mean, I liked him playing safety. Linebacker was very interesting, especially when it came time to stopping the run. Because having those smaller backers inside, it just wasn't beneficial. While also having a small interior line as well. So, in that aspect, I mean, I feel like he did the best he could do, which probably wasn't enough. But at safety, definitely be a problem. And I mean, if he did end up landing on a team like the Commanders, um, I think he got that type of dog. I think he got that type of dog that y'all safeties are known for having.
But
Type
before we
Hey,
get up out of here, before we
Hold
get
on.
up out of here, that was some shade. But
Nah, it wasn't. Nah, it
I'm gonna
wasn't.
come
I'm
back with
laughing
a little
because
bit
that
more
man
shade.
Rick is hilarious because he realized think that we got some dog safeties.
No,
He
no,
think about Sean Taylor. That's the only thing he think about,
no,
bro.
no, 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 no.
Bro, he was
So when I
dead ass when he said that, bro.
I'm more so and I'm not saying it from Sean Taylor, but I mean, of course, he was the start of it. But I mean, if you think about some of the strong safeties or the safeties that y'all have, like any safety that I think of when it came to the scans, like I'm not even talking about like overall quality of talent. Like when it just came to like toughness, like hitter, you know what I'm saying? Like that was the energy that came when it came to y'all safeties. Whether if it was who y'all had Collins for a while, y'all had Swearinger, y'all
Clark,
had
LaRon Landry.
come on, y'all
Merriweather.
had Landry, like all these dudes we naming, bro, were hitters. You feel me? That's what Bill is, and that's what I think about when it comes to like y'all secondary. Not saying that they was like, oh, these world renowned, safeties, but
They were
just had
Greg
that
Williams
dog
type of
energy.
safety. Like
They had that
Greg
dog
Williams
energy.
would love to have them on his roster because Greg Williams is head hunting. So that's the type
Yeah,
of
so
safety
he
you're
want people
talking
who
about.
hit. And I
Yeah,
appreciate
right.
that with
Man,
Dan too, bro, because Dan he a physical type of person. We was blitzing
hey,
all the time.
Yeah, y'all were.
so are you telling me the Cowboys are gonna start Ezekiel Elliott at running back?
Bro, this is a touching topic for me, bro. I'm not gonna lie to you, bro.
Yeah, hold on. Let's
Um,
go ahead and get AJ and Dre up out of here because Rick
Yeah,
been going on for
Yeah,
20
go
minutes,
hey,
go
bro.
ahead,
we
On
could
answer me
go
Ezekiel,
on
bro.
the
all
next
day
segment.
with
Uh,
this.
yeah,
Answer me
yeah,
on the
yeah,
next
yeah.
segment.
But
Because I
yeah.
need to know. I'm so lost with that move, but
All
hey.
right, let's add that to the topic list then,
Yeah,
man. When Nick get on here, but AJ Dre, man, y'all
yes,
boys
sir.
enjoy y'all night.
Yes,
We gonna
sir.
holler at y'all Tuesday, bro.
yeah, y'all
All right,
be
y'all
easy,
boys
man.
have a good one, man.
All right,
Most
Yes,
All right.
definitely.
sir. Yes, sir.